There's a dark irony at the heart of Inglourious Basterds. The man who shapes the revenge more than anyone else is the same man who should have killed it before it ever had a chance, Hans Landa. At first, that sounds completely wrong. Landa is the Jew hunter. He is the Nazi machine at its most polished, most intelligent, and most dangerous. If anyone in this film should have crushed revenge at the source, it was him. And yet, the deeper you look, the stranger his role becomes. Because Landa does not simply hunt revenge in this film, he gives it room. He delays the moment it should die. He lets certain stories continue when he has the power to end them, and by the time revenge is finally closing in on the Reich, he is no longer trying to destroy it. He is trying to step inside it and come out clean on the other side. That is what makes Hans Landa such a great villain. Not just that he is cruel, not just that he is brilliant, but that he understands something most villains don't. Sometimes, power is not about ending a story. Sometimes, it's about deciding how long that story gets to live. And that is why, to really understand Inglourious Basterds, you cannot begin with the fire in the theater or the bullets in the balcony. You have to begin with Hans Landa. Because before he becomes the man trying to survive the fall of the Reich, he is already the man quietly shaping the revenge that will destroy it.
The first thing that makes Landa so terrifying is not violence, it's timing. Most movie villains take control by moving fast. They kick the door open, they escalate, they force the scene forward. Landa does the opposite. He slows everything down. That is why the farmhouse scene works so well. It is not just a great opening, it is a complete blueprint for how Landa operates. He enters politely, he smiles, he asks for milk, he speaks with perfect calm. Nothing in the scene looks violent at first, but the tension is already there, because from the moment he sits down, he controls the rhythm of the room. He decides how long the pauses last. He decides when the conversation still feels harmless. He decides when politeness starts turning into pressure. And by the time Lapadite breaks, the scene has already been over for a while. Landa won long before he openly showed his hand. That is what makes him so disturbing. He doesn't just uncover the truth, he stages its arrival. He lets fear ripen before he acts. He understands that the moment before the knife goes in can sometimes be more powerful than the knife itself. That patience matters because it changes the way we read everything that comes after. Landa is not just a man who destroys resistance. He is a man who seems to enjoy letting resistance realize, slowly, that it has already been caught. He likes the stretch of time before the collapse. He likes the room just before it breaks. He likes knowing that everyone else is already moving inside a structure he controls. And once you understand that, a more unsettling possibility appears. Maybe Landa does not always end things when he first can. Maybe sometimes he keeps them alive because keeping them alive gives him a different kind of pleasure. Not the pleasure of destruction, but the pleasure of authorship. That is where the revenge in Inglourious Basterds starts to take on his fingerprints. Because revenge in this film does not grow in some world untouched by Landa. It grows inside the space he leaves open.
And in this film, timing is tied directly to language. Landa's real weapon is not just intelligence, it is the way he uses speech to control reality around him. In Inglourious Basterds, people often live or die through conversation. A sentence shifts, a pause lands differently. Someone says a little too much or not enough, or responds a second too late. Tarantino builds tension through talk, and no one in the film understands that better than Landa. He moves through language with total confidence. He changes tone effortlessly. He makes charm feel dangerous.
He can begin a scene in one emotional register and quietly move it somewhere much darker without ever announcing that the rules have changed. That is why his scenes feel so unstable. Other people are always reacting to the conversation they think they are in. Landa is already playing a different one. And sometimes, the most frightening thing about Landa is not that he reveals the truth, it is that he doesn't. The restaurant scene with Shosanna is the clearest example. He never says he knows her, he never exposes her directly, but that is exactly what makes the scene so tense. The entire sequence lives in the possibility that he already sees through her and has simply chosen not to speak the truth aloud. That is a very specific kind of power. It is one thing to discover something, it is another thing to decide when that discovery becomes useful. Landa can expose truth immediately, hold it back, or leave it hanging in the room like a weight no one can name. He can force someone to sit inside the knowledge that he may already know, and that uncertainty becomes its own form of torture. So when we talk about Landa shaping revenge, we are not just talking about plot mechanics, we are talking about control over the basic conditions that allow a revenge story to survive at all. Secrecy, delay, memory, silence, exposure. In that sense, Landa is not just the villain of the narrative, he is one of its hidden editors. Nowhere is that clearer than with Shosanna. If Hans Landa is the man who should have ended revenge before it began, then Shosanna is the living proof that he didn't. And that matters, because Landa is not a careless villain, he is too precise for that. Which means Shosanna's escape never feels like a simple accident. Whether you read it as intentional or not, the effect is the same. Her story continues because Landa does not fully close the trap. That changes everything. Because then, Shosanna is not just a survivor of Landa, she becomes the unfinished wound he leaves behind. And that may be the most haunting thing about her role in the film. Landa destroys her world, but he does not erase her. He leaves one part of the wound alive. He leaves memory breathing. He leaves the possibility of return. That does not make him merciful. It makes him more chilling. It suggests a man so confident in his power that he can leave damage behind without imagining that the damage might one day take shape and come back for him. That is exactly what Shosanna becomes. She disappears into another identity. She says little. She waits. She carries the past in silence. And when the chance finally comes, she does not answer violence with something simple or direct. She turns it into a spectacle. That is why her revenge feels so powerful. She does not just want Nazis dead. She wants them trapped inside an image. She wants their last experience to be shaped by projection, performance, and fire. She wants them to die inside a theater, beneath a screen, under the weight of representation itself. And in that sense, Shosanna becomes Landa's dark mirror. He turns terror into performance. She turns grief into performance. He uses the scene to dominate the powerless. She uses the screen to strike back at power. That parallel is crucial because it gives her revenge a form beyond simple retaliation. It becomes aesthetic, formal. Even authorship itself becomes part of the conflict. Landa spends the film entering rooms and controlling how truth unfolds inside them. Shosanna waits until she can create a room of her own, a theater, and then sees that same authority for herself. She does not simply kill the Nazis, she authors their final image. And that is why Landa's shadow still hangs over her story. He does not give her purpose, he does not own her pain, but he does create the conditions under which her revenge survives, grows, and eventually becomes something cinematic enough to consume the Reich itself. But Shosanna is only half of the argument, because with her, Landa's role still lives partly in interpretation. With the Basterds, it becomes much more explicit.
By the final act, Landa has become something colder than a sadist. He becomes an opportunist of history. At first, the Basterds seem like his opposite. They're blunt where he is refined, loud where he is quiet. They carve meaning into flesh with violence. He does it through language, ceremony, and control.
Ich befürchte, dass keiner von Ihnen ein einziges Wort Deutsch spricht. Es sind Freunde aus Italien.
Gli amici della vedetta ammirata da tutti noi, questa gemma propria della nostra cultura, saranno naturalmente accolti sotto la mia protezione per la durata del loro soggiorno.
Grazie.
But they share one important instinct. Both understand that violence is never just violence. It sends messages, it shapes myths, it determines how power will be remembered. Landa sees that clearly by the end. He sees where the mission is headed. He sees who is gathered in the theater. He sees what kind of moment this is. And at some point, he stops thinking like a servant of the Reich and starts thinking like a man who wants to survive its collapse. That is the key turn in his character. He no longer wants to defend the regime at all costs. He wants to position himself correctly for what comes after. And once he sees revenge moving towards success, he does not try to destroy it cleanly. He tries to attach himself to it. That is what makes him so morally disgusting in the final act. He does not build this revenge. He does not deserve it. He does not suffer for it. He simply recognizes that it might win, and he wants to collect value from the outcome. Safety, comfort, a future, a new version of himself. That is why I do not think it is enough to say Landa merely allows revenge to happen. That sounds too passive. He is not passive, he is opportunistic. He sees revenge coming, sees that it might bring down the Reich, and tries to convert that collapse into a private exit strategy. With Shosanna, Landa leaves revenge alive. With the Basterds, he does something even darker. He treats revenge like an investment. That is a key reason he matters so much to the film's ending. Not because he lights the fire or kills Hitler himself, but because he becomes the most important figure inside the Nazi machine who understands that the machine is losing control of its own ending. And instead of stopping that ending, he tries to negotiate his place inside it. That leads into the film's deepest symbolic conflict. By the climax, Inglourious Basterds is no longer just about who dies in the theater. It is about who gets to control what that death means. This is where Shosanna and Landa become more than enemies. They become opposing systems of authorship. Shosanna uses cinema to make the Reich's downfall unforgettable. Her revenge is built out of image, sound, projection, and flame. She takes the very medium fascism uses for myth-making and turns it against fascism at the peak of its self-worship. She is not just killing the Reich, she is staging its destruction. Landa, on the other hand, has no interest in giving that destruction beauty or permanence. He wants to survive it. He wants to turn it into paperwork, terms, negotiations, immunity, something usable. That contrast is brilliant. Shosanna wants the final image burned into history. Landa wants the aftermath organized into documents. She uses cinema to preserve memory. He uses bureaucracy to escape memory. And that is what makes Landa's presence so poisonous. He cannot own Shosanna's pain. He cannot own the Basterds' mission, but he can still try to stand close enough to their success that when the dust settles, he looks like part of the victory. He wants to survive not only physically, he wants to survive narratively. That is why the ending cannot simply destroy the Reich. The Reich burning is not enough. The film also has to stop Hans Landa from rewriting himself in the ashes.
I think this just might be my masterpiece.
That is where Aldo Rain's final act becomes so important. If Shosanna's fire destroys the regime, Aldo's knife destroys Landa's last illusion that he can walk out of history looking clean. The swastika carved into Landa's forehead is not just punishment. It is the film's refusal to let him reinvent himself. All movie long, Landa has relied on surfaces, language, manners, charm, intelligence, flexibility. He has lived by the belief that with enough control, any situation can be managed and any identity can be adjusted. Aldo's knife ends that. It takes authorship away from him. He can no longer explain himself into safety. He can no longer negotiate around what he is. He can no longer turn himself into a useful new version for the next regime. The body becomes the record. History is written directly onto him. That is why killing him would almost have been too simple. Death could have allowed him to disappear into the collapse. The mark forces him to remain visible. And that is the perfect ending for this character, because Hans Landa embodies one of the film's darkest ideas. Evil does not always vanish when an empire falls. Sometimes it adapts. Sometimes it changes language. Sometimes it senses that power is shifting and prepares to live comfortably in the next version of the world. That is what makes Landa feel so modern. He is not frightening only because he serves fascism. He is frightening because he knows how to survive near power without truly belonging to anything except himself. And that is exactly why the film refuses him a clean future.
So in the end, the darkest truth about Inglourious Basterds is not simply that Hans Landa is its greatest villain. It is that his hand remains inside the revenge almost all the way through. He is the man who should have crushed it first, yet he helps give it shape. He leaves Shosanna alive. He lets memory continue. He recognizes what the Basterds' mission could become, and instead of stopping it outright, he tries to step close enough to profit from its success. Again and again, Landa does more than oppose revenge. He helps define the conditions under which it survives. That is what makes him more disturbing than a conventional Nazi villain. He is not driven by loyalty in any pure sense. He is driven by control over people, over language, over timing, and finally, over the story history will tell after the violence ends. He does not just want power, he wants authorship. But Inglourious Basterds refuses him that privilege. Shosanna turns cinema into revenge. Aldo turns revenge into a scar that cannot be negotiated away. One destroys the Reich in fire and image, the other destroys Landa's fantasy of reinvention. That is why the ending lands so well. It is not just about punishing evil, it is about refusing to let evil rebrand itself after the fall. So yes, there is a dark irony at the heart of Inglourious Basterds. The man who shaped the revenge most deeply was the very man who should have crushed it from the start. But in the end, the revenge Landa helped keep alive becomes the thing that exposes him completely. He tries to manage it, he tries to benefit from it, he tries to leave his signature on it. Instead, the story leaves its mark on him. Hans Landa wanted to shape revenge. In the end, revenge shapes him back.
So, what do you think? Was Hans Landa simply the villain of Inglourious Basterds? Or was he also the man who helped shape its revenge from the inside? If you see him differently after this video, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy character analysis like this, subscribe for more film essays.